All right, welcome to College Football Addiction. Talking about the Big Ten and some kind of awkward or weird scenarios that could happen with the fact that there are no divisions and the fact that we could have some weird 3 and 4 team ties with one loss based on how this season finishes up. Now, we all know that the divisions have gone away, and so your top 2 teams go to Indy for the Big Ten Championship. We've been covering this pretty extensively on the ACC here on College Football Addiction. Some folks have reached out and asked, can you do this for other conferences? And so we're doing it for all 4 of the major conferences. And if things get really crazy in a group of 5 conference, maybe we'll do it there too. But we'll stick with the big 4 at this point. Now, it's pretty obvious to everyone involved that Oregon is in a really good spot. If they win, they're probably in. They're probably good to go. But what happens if Oregon wins and Indiana wins out, Penn State wins out, and you've got 3 teams tied for first place with no losses? That's not necessarily likely. Indiana's got some tough games ahead of them. Penn State has a really tough one this weekend in which they're an underdog at home. And so it's not necessarily likely, but it certainly is a possibility. What happens if that goes down? What happens if Ohio State wins their next couple of games? They beat Penn State and they beat Indiana. Would they all of a sudden have the tiebreaker of those teams? Not necessarily. The Big Ten tiebreaker rules are not that cut and dry. So let's talk about that today. If you're with us for the first time, I'm planning on doing this weekly unless 2 teams just very far separate. But with only 5 weeks left in the college football season, it should be something that we can kind of monitor over the last few weeks and kind of break down and give you a cheering guide, or, hey, if you're rooting for this team, you need to root for that one. That's kind of a big picture of what we'll do over the next several weeks until it becomes not necessary anymore. But until we kind of get some more clarity as to what's going on, it certainly is kind of foggy, and I'm happy to do the research so that you don't have to. So hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of this. Cover a lot of college football here. You may like the channel, you may not, but these should at least be informative to you. Now, again, Oregon's in a pretty good spot. They win, and they're probably in. Could be some weird tiebreakers if some upsets happen of Ohio State. If Indiana and Penn State can kind of beat them and win out, you get kind of a weird one there at the top with 3 undefeated teams potentially. But the tiebreaker that you would end up running into if you had multiple teams tied, whether it was multiple teams tied for first place, you had 3 undefeated teams in the Big Ten, or say Oregon wins out and Ohio State hands Indiana and Penn State a loss, and you have 3 teams with 1 loss sitting there in second place. Who would get in there? What it would end up coming down to, and I know this maybe sounds backwards, even though Ohio State would have beaten both of those teams, because all 3 teams didn't play each other, at least the way that I'm reading the rules, the way that I'm reading the Big Ten's rules, that wouldn't necessarily just get Ohio State in. Now, maybe there'd be a reapplication of a rule that they would try and figure out there in Tony Bottini's office. I don't know, but the way that I'm reading the rule right now is all 3 of those teams would need to have played each other for that to matter. And so because that's not the case, what it would end up coming down to, if Ohio State beats Indiana and Penn State, which they probably will be favored to do in both of them, and we end up with Oregon in first place undefeated, and then 3 teams tied for second with 1 loss each, it would come down to the records of everyone else's conference opponents. So it would basically be out of Ohio State's hands. It would be out of Indiana's hands, and it would be out of Penn State's hands. They would have no control over it. There'd be nothing they could do about that. It would come down to how strong was your Big Ten schedule. Your 8-1 may be different than someone else's 8-1. Your undefeated record may be different than someone else's undefeated record. If we end up with 3 at the top, if you had, again, Oregon, Penn State, and Indiana, your undefeated record might be stronger than someone else's, and so you would be the team to go on. If it goes further than that, it gets way too complex for me to try to explain on a YouTube video, and so I'm not going to do that. Now, Ohio State, again, could beat both of them. You could have a 3-way tie for second. That would get kind of weird. You'd have other things that you could get to. You know, Oregon drops a game. You'd have a 4-way tie. You could look at their common opponents. I've tried to map that out, what that would look like. It's really hard to do without knowing who Oregon might drop to. But again, what it's probably going to come down to is the cumulative conference winning percentage for all opponents. I believe you do this for first place, and then you start over again and do it for second place if it was a tie of all four at the top, which I don't necessarily think that, or all three at the top, which I don't necessarily think that's what's going to happen. Right now, Oregon's opponents have a 41.86% winning percentage. Indiana's are at 34.88. They've certainly had the easiest road. Penn State's are at 40.91, so pretty close there to Oregon's. And then sit down for this one. Ohio State's opponents are at 58.14. For all the jokes and all the things that get said about Ohio State's schedule year in and year out, they've played the toughest, and it is not close. Their Big Ten opponents are, I mean, you just think about it. They play Oregon, Penn State, and Indiana all in the same year. They also played a really good Nebraska team. Like, they are absolutely playing everybody. And then, of course, they get Michigan at the end of the year. I know Michigan's down, but Ohio State's schedule is no joke this year. Now, if a tiebreaker scenario comes about, Ohio State is almost assuredly going to be the one that's on the right side of that. However, there is a lot of time left, and they're not scot-free. If they lose to Penn State this weekend, their opponent's conference winning percentage really isn't going to matter. I want to show you guys who you should be cheering for in case some of these games end up in kind of a weird tiebreaker scenario. Again, if Ohio State wins against Penn State and against Indiana, it's going to come down to those three teams. And Ohio State is way out in front right now, but that certainly could change for Indiana and Penn State based on a lot of Big Ten games that are going to be played between now and the end of November. I'm going to show you that cheering guide, and you can screenshot that if you'd like. But first, I do want to tell you about our Discord. I just set this up, and I've really enjoyed the banter going back and forth here on the channel in the comments. YouTube comments are great for quick thoughts and quick reactions, and people cussing me out because they don't like what I've said, or if I've been too hard on their team or not hard enough or whatever. It's not great for communicating, though, especially during games, during big events, during big things that happen. I've linked our Discord down in the description. It's free to join. There's no cost. There's no sign up. I don't need any of your information. It's just a good place that we can maybe chat and talk about college football when we're not here on YouTube and we're not commenting on things. During games, I'd love to be able to chat with you guys about different things. And if that's something you're interested in, great. Go sign up. Go chat with us in there. It's brand new, so there's not a lot going on there right now. But come over there. I'd really like, and if you guys would like to join that, again, it is free. A cheering guide for you this weekend. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. We'll look at the games that have impact. Ohio State and the Penn State game. Now, obviously, you've got two of the four teams that are involved here in it. There's a couple of different ways that you could look at this. Oregon and Indiana play Ohio State, so maybe they should cheer for them, but logic might say the opposite. Logic might say, hey, Ohio State could pick up their second loss, so get rid of them and we'll be that much further and only have to compete against, the other three teams. So there's a couple of different ways you can look at this. Logic, again, might say, hey, get rid of them, give them their second loss. If you're thinking about the percentage side of things, Oregon and Indiana probably want Ohio State to win because then that's a little bit better for their percentages. Indiana also can just take care of their own business. If Ohio State beats Penn State and eliminates them, Indiana could then beat Ohio State and they're both out. And so I think that is risky for Indiana because beating Ohio State is certainly a tall task. But if I'm Oregon, I probably want Ohio State to keep winning. It looks better, my win earlier in the year. So I'm going to put that they should cheer for Ohio State here, but that's only for the percentages. If you want to just get rid of Ohio State as a competitor in this 4-team race, then maybe if you're a fan of Oregon, Indiana, you should cheer for Penn State. Minnesota, Illinois. Oregon plays Illinois, so they should certainly cheer for them. Everyone else is chasing Oregon, so they should want the opposite. They should be cheering for Minnesota in that matchup. Northwestern and Purdue. Oregon plays Purdue, and Indiana plays Indiana and Ohio State. They're both chasing Oregon, so they should want Northwestern. Penn State plays Purdue, so they should obviously cheer for them. That one's pretty straightforward. The next one is Oregon and Michigan. Oregon wants to win. Everyone else is chasing them, so they should cheer for Michigan to win. I know that's probably sacrilegious for Ohio State, but if Ohio State picks up another loss, they're going to need Oregon to lose some games. I do think that it would be – Ohio State fans, I know you're not going to do it, but it'd be good for you if Michigan won that game to bring them back down to the pack and give you an even better chance of getting to Indianapolis. Indiana versus Michigan State. Indiana wants to win. Obviously, everyone else should want them to lose. That one's pretty straightforward. When there's a team that's in the competition that's in our Big Four, then, you want them to lose to knock them down a little bit. UCLA and Nebraska, Oregon and Penn State play UCLA, so they should be cheering for them. Ohio State and Indiana play Nebraska, so they should want Nebraska to win. That one, again, pretty straightforward. Not a lot of having to go there. Wisconsin and Iowa is a big one as well. Ohio State plays Iowa. Oregon and Penn State play Wisconsin. So you cheer for the teams that are on your schedule. Indiana doesn't play either, but hurting two teams probably helps them more than just hurting one team. So they should probably cheer for Iowa. This one maybe not as important if you're an Indiana fan. Don't need to go all out cheering for Iowa here, but that's probably the lean in that one. And then USC and Washington. Oregon and Indiana both play Washington, so they should cheer for the Huskies. Penn State plays both, but they can gain on Oregon and increase their lead on Indiana if USC wins. Ohio State doesn't really matter for them. I'd probably lean USC here because it does hurt Oregon a tad more and it hurts Indiana a little more. So again, when you can kind of cripple two teams or hurt two teams in a possible tiebreaker, that's more advantageous to me than just hurting one. So that is the Week 10 cheering guide. You're more than welcome to screenshot that if that'll help you. Back it up a little bit and hit the screenshot button. Maybe cheer for that while you're watching college football here on Saturday. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. We're not quite to the doomsday scenario that the ACC is in right now, or even the SEC where things look really crazy over there. The Big 10 and the Big 12 are approaching it. They're not there just yet, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I'd love to hear your comments, just things you like about this, breakdowns you like that are similar to this. What can I answer? What can I clarify for you? I'm planning on doing this week by week by week. When I've done this in the ACC, I've done it for about 4 weeks now. People have told me like, oh, can you start to go deeper into this? Can you go deeper into why this matters? And I'm more than happy to do that. So hit the comments and let me know. Again, if you watched this whole video, if you spent 10 plus minutes with us, go join our Discord. Again, it's free, not trying to get anything from you. Just think it's a good place where we can interact. Comments on YouTube aren't always the best. There's a channel that's dedicated to the Big Ten. You could certainly go chat about this video there if you'd like. But again, go check us out over there, College Football Addiction on Discord. The link is in the description. Hey, I appreciate you guys watching. We'll have a lot more clarity after Saturday night. Actually, after the games are over on Saturday, it may be more clarity. It may be more confusion based on what happens in Happy Valley. But appreciate you guys a ton for hanging out. We'll talk to you soon here on College Football Addiction.